this legacy stuff and about class and race. And I used to say, when people would say, "Hey, don't forget class," and I'd say, "Well, it's always race. It's always about race. More race than class, because a rich man who is a person of color doesn't have that automatic privilege that you'd usually find with a white person. So race always, to me, always was more important than class. But now I think I see how it has to be more class. And when people say, "Oh, we got to go beyond class now," or beyond race, when we think about affirmative action, yeah, I get it now. I'm just showing that I'm a man who changes. But I have a thing to say about legacy admissions. We're going to talk about today. Welcome to Emil, Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. My micro talk show that asks a question, WDAAT, what does an Asian American think? And they don't ask, they never ask. But I'll fill you in. Welcome to this program. I'm here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific. I glean through the news, I react, and I just offer a perspective I think that is a little different than others. So we'll talk today about this legacy thing. Talk about something happened in San Francisco that's really strange. Well, it's not really strange. It happens. They're beating up Asian Americans. And there's still a discussion on whether or not they should be hate crimes. I think definitely they should be hate crimes or considered hate crimes. But the fact that they're still happening shows you that, we shouldn't suddenly push this to the side and say it's not an issue. So I'll talk about that. That's happening in San Francisco. I'll talk about the Secretary of Education, Cardona, and what he said about what to do after affirmative action has been deracinated, as race has been taken out of the equation. What needs to happen, according to the Secretary of Education. But I want to talk a little about the Trump watch. We are on this Trump watch like everyone else. This was the day that the grand jury was in session in Washington, and so Trump was there with his attorneys, and they're holding fast to this idea that the government is being weaponized against him, and that he did nothing wrong. He posted something on Truth Social saying he did nothing wrong, and of course we know the evidence suggests otherwise, and it's going to be a heck of a case. In fact, it's going to be it looks like the letter informing him that there was, it's a letter informing him that he's a target. That's going to turn out into an indictment. So we're just sort of going through the process and the paces. Grand jury's in session, nothing today, but it could come tomorrow. It could come the next day. There's no guidance, no timeline about what to expect, but they showed up because, I suppose, what does Trump have to lose? But I think the United States citizenry, the public, has a lot to gain, because when you see a former president, or understand that he's going up to the judge on a target letter, and he also is the leading Republican candidate, I want to see more of that all the time. Because I don't take the view that, this makes Trump more sympathetic. This gives Trump the ability to raise money. Oh, yeah, he'll probably do that. But it also sinks in, it should sink in by now, that this is a person who wants to be president, who already is facing 2 criminal indictments, one in New York, state charge, one in Florida on the documents case. And here is a third on January 6th in a federal court. I mean, at some point, it just sinks in. This is a man who has 3 criminal indictments against him, and he wants to be president. I think at some point, a prudent person, a prudent member of our society would say, I think we should have someone else. I mean, I'm not a Republican, but I think a prudent Republican would have to say, an indicted person shouldn't really consider the presidency, and a thrice indicted person. Oh, so I like to see this drag out, and here you see the former president pleading before a judge. Here is a man who was once leader of the free world pleading before a judge so he can run for president. No, it does not compute. He should find himself disqualified to run again. And only ego allows him to stay up there, and ego in his megalomania allows him to stay up there. Normal people would just say, for the good of the country, I'm gonna back down. But he didn't say that. So I like the fact that he went before the grand jury today, and that nothing came out of it, nothing conclusive. So an indictment is certainly forthcoming. Who knows when? But in the meantime, for all us observers, we should just let this sink in. Finally, hey, this is a guy who wants to be president, and he should, at this point, if he wants to go down in history as just the worst president who ever, claimed the office, I mean, that would be a step up to be the worst. But now, I mean, I think he's below that if he forces Americans to endure this pain. This is not a good look for our democracy. So anyway, that's my take on Trump Watch. It continues. So let's talk about legacy. I talked about it. Yes, I thought about it more last night, and I wrote my column for the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and it's going to be up there on their site. But basically, I say, if you think I mention Harvard a lot, please forgive me. I did wait until several minutes into the show, 6 words into this piece I've written, to mention. This restraint may not be much compared to those, mostly white, who incessantly debate, when do I drop the H-bomb? As a social calculation so as not to alarm people that they are in the presence of an arrogant a-hole. Forgive them their false humility. But I don't use the H-bomb to brag. I use it as it was intended, to level the playing field. If the infamous Jeffrey Epstein and I were in a lineup and he was wearing a Harvard t-shirt, as he was wont to do, who would you pick out as the Harvard alum? Not me. Epstein went to Cooper Union before he taught at Dalton and before he went to prison. He met Bill Gates on Epstein Island. I was just a Filipino American in Bill Gates's Harvard class. And now I mention this because I'm in a unique position in the never-ending, that's what it seems like, it's the never-ending Harvard affirmative action debate. I am the progenitor of bona fide Asian American Harvard legacies, which, of course, is a fancy way of saying my kids were born with legacy tickets in hand. If only Harvard had let them in. Finally, and this is just after the Supreme Court ruling to get rid of affirmative action for all, finally, the legal focus is being placed on the only real indefensible affirmative action that ever existed, the advantage given to legacies. You know, these are the sons and daughters of alumni primarily. As a group, they represent 5% of the applicants to Harvard each year, according to the New York Times, but they are around 30% of those admitted. Overrepresented? Slightly. 67.8% of them are also white, according to court records. That's why it's fair to call it affirmative action for whites. It's the privilege push. Now that the Supreme Court has banned the use of race in college admissions for BIPOC applicants, shouldn't the next step be to go after any admissions policy that allows a profound preference for one race in particular? The court has paved the way for colorblind, but white legacy policy leaves admissions officers snowblind. All they see is white. And we have the lawyers from the Chica Project, the African Community Economic Development of New England, and the Greater Boston Latino Network to thank for this new focus. They've asked the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights to investigate Harvard under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's an investigation that could lead to a legal battle equal to the one that just ended affirmative action for Blacks, Latinos, and Asians. Or it could simply force Harvard to do the right thing. Make legacy admissions fairer and more diverse. In the recent Harvard case, it was the only bit of common ground between the Students for Fair Admissions, the mostly Chinese American students, led by white conservative activist Ed Blum, to fight affirmative action, and their counterparts, the pro-affirmative action Asians who allied themselves with the historical fight for civil rights. So there are these two camps, the AAAA, the anti-affirmative action Asians, and the PAAA, the pro-affirmative action Asians, and they could agree on only one thing. What about all these legacies? The majority of whom happened to be white and wealthy, they asked. And when it came up at trial, Harvard wouldn't budge. It defended legacy admits as being highly qualified, but it was unclear if it meant by grades or bank accounts. After the SCOTUS decision, the Student for Fair Admissions, Bloom, was asked about legacy at a news conference, and he said he wasn't a lawyer, then, as an aside, said that no one sued over legacies because of an issue of standing. Maybe. He was just being coy. Far be it for the white man using Asians to end affirmative action to advocate for an end to legacy admissions that primarily benefit rich whites. But the question remains, can legacy white affirmative action policy even be seen as defensible now? Given the school's endowment, which stands at more than $50 billion, Harvard can solve all this simply, starting by installing a colorblind legacy process. They can afford it. Why were white wealthy legacies advantaged over poor ones like me in the first place? And I don't mean to insult the poor. I live a comfortable and normal middle-class life. There are 4 million Filipinos in America out of 400 million Americans. That's the only 1% to which I am a part. So put my kind of legacies into the lottery or into some kind of lottery mix. Allow people to qualify for the chance at a truly random shot at admissions. What can be more fair? Under those circumstances, you're likely to get a better shot at a diverse freshman class after 40 years of affirmative action. At Harvard, or as Harvard legacies, my children were all more qualified than me, considering grades and test scores. One had overcome a severe case of dyslexia only to graduate from an international baccalaureate program with honors. He was told in third grade he'd never be able to read. My legacies are also the picture of diversity, half Filipino, half white. They had all the qualifications, except a rich father. When donations matter, college is pay to play. Ask Jared Kushner's father, an NYU grad who gave millions to Harvard to let Jared in. my Harvard reject was accepted at UC Berkeley. My other kids were too independent to want to be test cases. But I'm certain Harvard could have warded off most of the problems of the last 10 years of litigation if it had only lived up to the belief that for qualified students from diverse backgrounds, there was a way to level the playing field. So now, really, the choice is Harvard's. Get rid of legacy admissions altogether, or admit a greater number of children of alums who are not so white and wealthy. That would call for a wholehearted embrace of the legacy of affirmative action. And, that's what it is. It is the legacy of affirmative action. More than 40 years of affirmative action. You got to have a diverse class of alum. Why are 70% of these legacy admits mostly white and wealthy? Diversify, allow for the legacy of affirmative action to be admitted, or just simply do away with legacy admits. Totally. I gave a suggestion. I always like a lottery because lottery is all about randomness, right? And scientists love random. It's random. Like it makes it fair. That's what they should do. That really is the issue when it comes to legacy. So I just wanted to get that off my chest because it's the new debate. Cardona is out there, and he's saying some interesting things. Let's see, let me find this article. He's saying some interesting things about what should be done now. He was talking, let's see, where is it? Oh. Just trying to find it. He was just talking about, pumping money into programs to make sure that the Department of Education can deal with this post-SCOTUS affirmative action ruling era. But one of the things that he mentioned with this idea of what it was qualified. And he talked about kids from BIPOC communities, who, have had circumstances to overcome that were truly unique. Compared to other legacies. If you're a legacy and you're going to a school that is either a substandard school, but you're in an elite IB program, or say you go to an elite program like I did at Lowell High School, and you go 2 hours in the morning by bus to get to school, and then you go 2 hours back home and you do your homework and you take care of your parents, and your parents don't speak English, and everyone has these unique circumstances. But he talked about that situation, like, there are kids of alum who aren't rich, who aren't like Bill Gates's kid, but they're Emil Guillermo's kid. Do they get a break? Not when the system is part pay to play. Not when it's all about class. That's why, as I said at the beginning, my views about class over race have changed. And now we need to do whatever it takes to get a better, fair racial balance. Just some thoughts now. It's just a month after the affirmative action ruling from the court. I was thinking that, boy, we haven't heard much from activists, from anyone really, except like, oh, it's summer, and people are just trying to get their head around what it means to be colorblind. And surely they're going to, although there's some people say, look, we've been colorblind for a long time. We had to, California, for example. But now that the attention's on legacy, I think we might see some some kind of movement which shows, hey, look, the last 40 years weren't all for naught. I mean, there is a pool of legacy folks who are far more diverse after 40 years of affirmative action in all the elite schools, not just Harvard, all the elite schools. I mean, this is one of the reasons why some elite schools are saying, look, we're going to get rid of diversity, or get rid of legacy. We don't need legacy. We'll just admit people and go on the merits. We won't look at race. We won't look at legacy. But now, if you're not going to look at race, is it fair for legacy folks to get the push? And who gets the push? White legacies. So make it a part of the policy that you're going to diversify legacy for all. There are enough affirmative action legacies out there, believe me, to offset any loss from just picking the white and the wealthy. All right. Let me talk about that San Francisco case. Brooke Jenkins was she was holding forth because of a problem of violence in San Francisco. Brooke Jenkins is saying that she calls a string of assaults are unacceptable, and she urges residents to protect their most vulnerable of neighbors. So she's calling for people to pitch in. She says, we have got to get this city to a place where people understand that there is accountability for their actions, and where instead of us standing by and watching things like this happen, that we mobilize together. That's what she said, to shield people who might be preyed upon, Jenkins said. This is weird. Does this mean that she wants to see vigilante groups out there? I mean, because it mobilize together, or just means just walk with an older person or a vulnerable person? Strength in numbers? Although it sounds a bit like, hey, don't expect the cops to be out there. Her remarks followed two incidents that rattled the city in July that the apparently unprovoked kicking of an 88-year-old woman in Chinatown on Friday, and the alleged assault of a 60-year-old man in the Excelsior 3 days later. Both victims are of Asian descent, but Jenkins has so far declined to file hate crime allegations in either case, according to a spokesperson who noted that the investigations are continuing. Okay, so there's no knee-jerk to file a hate crime charge, although it's clear that race seems to have been a factor. But this statement, I believe in accountability. The recent attacks that we have seen against elderly members of the Asian community are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in San Francisco. We need to mobilize together to make sure we protect the most vulnerable in our communities. Okay, it sounds good, but mobilizing together, once again, it sounds like, does she mean like we need to see vigilantes out there? I don't know. I mean, hey, don't be restrained. Use your martial arts. Oakland man James Lee Ramsey is facing a raft of felony charges, including elder abuse and assault by means likely to produce great bodily injury for the Friday attack, in which he allegedly kicked a woman to the ground on Stockton Street near Chinatown. Or that's in Chinatown. The second defendant, Andrew Domino, was arraigned Wednesday on charges of elder abuse and assault with force likely to produce great bodily injury, court records show. Violence has ramped up locally and nationally during the COVID-19 pandemic, coinciding with racist rhetoric from then President Donald Trump. Community leaders and activists fear these attacks have continued even as the public spotlight has started to fade, and as city leaders missed the jump here. The number of assaults on Asians and Asian seniors is incredible, Sunset resident and public safety advocate Frank Noto told the Chronicle. Noto, who serves as president of the nonprofit Stop Crime SF, called this month's attacks a source of anxiety and concern, and worried that people arrested for prior episodes had been released back to the street. So you wonder why some Asian Americans, in San Francisco at least, have a more conservative streak. A lot of it is a real fear that's played out and how it's being attended to by city leaders. That's the DA, Brooke Jenkins. She has the job that Kamala Harris once had. And frankly, I have to say this. Kamala Harris, when she was DA, was not so quick to come down with the hammer on perps against Asian Americans. I mean, that's just a fact. And it's one of the things that has made me reluctant to wholeheartedly, back her subsequently in political races. But Brooke Jenkins, the statement that I just read, sounds like she's talking out of both sides of her mouth. I believe in accountability. The recent attacks that we have seen against elderly members of the Asian community are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Okay, great. Then she says, we need to mobilize together to make sure we protect the most vulnerable in our communities. Is she calling for vigilantism? She could have said, we're going to have more cops on the beat. We're going to be on the lookout. We're going to need you to help. Be on the lookout. She just needed to say the city is behind you. And the city's going to do all it can to make sure this never happens again. Could have said that. She could have also said, darn it, we're going to file those hate crime charges. We have enough. File the charges. She can drop them later. But, they don't want to look that bad. They don't want to look like, oh, we're just like throwing charges around at all these people. I know, this is the city that knows how. It used to be called that. It used to be called this. It doesn't really know how. But it's finding its way. I hope. I hope it does. All right. We do a short show today. Oh no, I want to do this. James Clear is he's a writer, James Clear, and he puts out some posts that are always they're interesting to talk about. And let's see, let me get the latest one. And they're just like little aphorisms that are there to think about. It's called 321. He calls this 321 Thursday. James Clear, the best-selling author, he calls this 321 on the power of attitude and the importance of making mistakes. So it's 3 ideas from him, and then 2 quotes from others, and then 1 question for you. So it's kind of interesting. So the first one, 3 ideas from James Clear. Anxiety is thought without control. Flow is control without thought. Now think about that. So you're anxious and you're thinking and you're all over the place because you just don't know how to feel. I mean, you're anxious about something about to happen and your thoughts are out of control. not good. What's the opposite of anxiety? To be totally in the flow. And he says, flow is control without thought, just being in the moment. You're in control, but there's no thought processes that, push and pull you. You just go forward or go wherever you want because it's flow, and flow is control without thought. Something to think about. I mean, certainly anxiety. A lot of people suffering from that. To get into the flow, how can you be in the present so that you're just right there without thought, just that which is before you? I think about that sometimes when I, do performances, live performances, speaking in the theater, just trying to be now in the present with the things I prepared, the things from a script, the things that I've written. And so that I'm giving people the best possible show now, right? Anyway, thought number 2, or idea number 2 from James Clear. One sign you haven't done enough reading is if you find yourself agreeing with whatever book you read last, or maybe with whatever you just heard or whatever you just read, a column, and an opinion piece. At first, it's easy to be swayed by any reasonable argument. Once you've read a lot, you can see that even the best arguments have limitations. Well, I think it just shows that you have to be skeptical. But I want to hand it to the person who's the writer, who is persuasive. I mean, don't just put up your guard and fight the persuasive tactics. But know that if you read more, you would be slower at being totally persuaded. Right? He said one sign you haven't done enough reading is if you find yourself agreeing with whatever book or column or whatever you read last. Well, read more, definitely. And then see if that helps your skepticism. An informed skepticism. Here's idea 3. We want solutions, but what we really need are attitudes. You don't need abs, but rather an attitude of training. You don't need the answer, but rather an attitude of curiosity. You don't need an easier life, but rather an attitude of perseverance. Attitude precedes outcome. Maybe, but you can have the attitude, but you better start reading a few books too, right? You got to know. You got to know about, where to draw the solutions, where the best things are. So yeah, we want solutions, and we want them to come from veritable sources. But he says, what we really need we need attitude to say we're going to get to the answer. We need that kind of perseverance. We need curiosity. We need, an attitude of perseverance, he says. All right, I can get that. Attitude precedes out. Attitude will get you a long way. Attitude will get you started. Attitude will be the spark. And then you'll need some other things. Here are 2 quotes from others. This is from musician Nick Cave on love and grief. It seems to me that if we love, we grieve. That's the deal. That's the pact. God, if we love, we grieve. I guess, we're all mortal, so if we love, grieving is, you can't really avoid that. Grief and love are forever intertwined. Grief is the terrible reminder of the depths of our love, and like love, grief is non-negotiable. I guess I get that. The more you love, the more you'll grieve. Although you could say, look, I love so much, I I have a different kind of grief. Not based on a kind of sentimental thing, but I'm stronger in my grief, maybe. I don't know. Nick Cave, letter to a fan named Cynthia from Letters of Note. This is from Lewis Thomas. So it goes two quotes from others. This is from Lewis Thomas. On the importance of making mistakes. I've made a few today. Mistakes are at the very base of human thought, embedded there, feeding the structure like root noodles or root nodules. I just made a mistake. If we were not provided with the knack of being wrong, we could never get anything useful done. We think our way along by choosing between right and wrong alternatives, and the wrong choices have to be made as frequently as the right ones. We get along in life this way. We are built to make mistakes, coded for error. We learn, as we say, by trial and error. Why do we always say that? Why not trial and rightness or trial and triumph? The old phrase puts it that way because that is in real life the way it is done. Lewis Thomas from The Medusa and the Snail on the importance of making mistakes. That's interesting. I mean, we say trial and error because, yeah, it's go there and then correct, go there, correct, go there and correct. So does that mean that we should forgive? And we should forgive anyway, right? But shouldn't there be consequences for error? At some point, you're going to have to forgive. But maybe never forget. But at least it will make us, by considering this quote by physician Lewis Thomas, we consider that making mistakes may be among the most important thing we do as we constantly go forward and correct and go forward and correct. It's sort of like an airplane. You know, you look at an airplane going from New York to San Francisco and back, and it's never a straight line. Boom. It's always like, you look at its actual movement and it's like a little zigzag. That way, no this way. That way, no this way. That way, no this way. Go forward, correct. Go forward, correct. Something to think about. And then one question for you. What is the one task that, if completed, will make today a success? What can you do to make it as easy as possible to get started? Think about that. No, I know what one thing I could do right now. I mean, if you say something as simple as clearing off your desk, right? Oh, just take all the newspapers and throw them all away. I mean, that's the easy thing. I mean, you got most of them online. So can you do that? I mean, that's the one thing. If you did that, boy, that would make, would that make today a success? No, I'd have to do that in conjunction with a couple other things. Because then once I clear out the newspapers, then I'll do all the other things that the newspapers were on top of that required me to put some attention to. What is the one task that, if completed, will make today a success? What can you do to make it as easy as possible to get started? Just something to think about today on Thursday. All right, we said we're going to try to make it a short show. I will. Look, we got a break today. If Trump were indicted, we'd be, like scurrying over all the different things. The indictment, how many, if they say this was going to be the mother of all indictments, it could be like how many counts? January 6th, and we'd be pouring on the fly, trying to, pouring over the pages on the fly to try to pull out the salient parts. It'd be crazy, but no, we got a a little respite here. They said, okay, not today, but it's coming. It's coming. All right, so that's it for today's show. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific or thereabouts, here on amok.com, on Twitter. I still can't get over the X. I'm not calling it X. Still the Twitter to me. Still the blue birdie, although I'm seeing less of the blue bird. I know maybe this is the thing to get us off Twitter, right? I mean, everyone's been thinking, I got to get off Twitter. Now they're not friendly to birds. I mean, going off. And everything I'm reading suggests that Elon Musk he's got this thing for X. I mean, I get it. You're in math, solve for X. X could be anything. I get it. Yeah. But it just doesn't look right. I mean, when that X was on the Twitter building, I thought it meant that the Twitter had been canceled. X. Anyway, watch this show on Twitter at Emil Amok, on YouTube at Emil Amok 1, on Facebook at fb.com/Emil Guillermo Media. YouTube, go to YouTube. That's a good one. You can go see the PETA podcasts. Certainly, please subscribe, rate, review, do all that. It's helpful. Here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific or thereabouts, live. And yeah, so I like to meditate, right? So I'll spare the meditation today. I mean, I was going to do another Marianne Williamson meditation. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. But I like her. I'm not saying it's an endorsement of her run for president, but it is a endorsement of look at her. I mean, if we had a president who talked with love and kindness, if we had a president who had a grasp of the ideas and the policies, as well as the spiritual nature that all Americans are looking for. I mean, not this faux right-wing theology, this right-wing theocracy, but someone who really comes from a diverse spiritual background, trying to do good for humanity and for our country. That would be unique. I mean, are we ready for that? Are we ready at least for someone like that having a real say in the direction of our country? So anyway, check her out, Marianne Williamson on Substack. Transform Substack. All right. We always end with a little bit of love and kindness. Metta, not METTA, but METTA, loving kindness. Loving kindness. Because before you offer self-love and self-care, offer it to others, and then it comes back. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Ahal Kita.